Welcome to Widowed Too Soon, where real-life widows and widowers come together to share their stories of survival, faith, and the journey of finding hope in the darkest of times. Whether you're newly widowed or have been on this journey for some time, each week we're here to provide you with inspiration, practical advice, and the reassurance that you are not alone. You were made to not only survive, but thrive. And now here's your host, a woman who has walked this path herself, who finds solace in writing, joy in speaking, and freedom in dancing like nobody's watching. Michelle Bader Ebersole.
Hey friends, I just wanted to add this little clip to let you know that after this podcast aired, I found out that I'm actually going to be one of the speakers that Jennifer talks about on this episode at the retreat she's planning. So I just want to let you know that if any of you guys want to come, I would love to meet you in person. The link is in the show notes, and make sure that you mention that you heard about it on Widow Too Soon. All right, now time for the show. Welcome to Widow Too Soon. This is Michelle Bader Ebersole. I am so excited to be back with another guest. It's been a whirlwind of a weekend. I just got back from Nashville from the Good Grief Retreat, and it was amazing. And you know what I think is super amazing? The person who started, her name's Becca. I can't remember her last name right now. She's not even widowed, and she has decided to do this retreat for widows. It was her 4th year. There are about 30 widows. We really bonded. I had a great time speaking to them. And then, of course, we got to go see Nashville a little bit, which was awesome. Country Music Hall of Fame, and then just downtown with all the music, and it was amazing. So anyways, that's a little bit about what I'm doing, but I really want to get to our guest. I'm super excited about this new friend that I've made. And so today I have with me Jennifer Newberg. How are you, Jennifer?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. How are you?
Yes, good. And tell us where you're coming from. Where do you live?
I live in Natick, Massachusetts, which is about 20 miles outside of Boston, Massachusetts.
Okay. Are you anywhere near Beverly? Do you know that town?
I'm about an hour from Beverly. Beverly's on the North Shore. But I love Beverly, though. It's beautiful
so
there.
cute.
I have a couple of friends that live there. It's really cute.
Joel's, my current husband, his parents live there, and his whole family lives in Beverly. So it's super cute.
Oh, really?
Love it out there. I've been out there.
It's near the water.
Yes, I've been out there like 3 times, and then I've got to go downtown Boston a few times, and it's really cool. It's a beautiful, cute little town. Love it.
It's a great city. I mean, I've lived in the Boston area since 2004, so it's been 20 plus years at this point.
Oh, where did you live before that?
It's a great place to live. I grew up in South Florida.
Okay.
So I grew up in the Fort Lauderdale area. Went to college in Florida. Then I moved up to New York to live the big New York City life. Wasn't really my thing. Lasted a couple of years, and then I moved here with my first husband.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's get into your story. I'm excited. I know a tiny bit, but I'm excited to learn more along with the audience. So let's start with, how did you meet your late husband? Excuse me.
So my late husband's name is Jack. And it's actually kind of a funny story.
Love it.
I was at a community pool area in around May, and a woman came up to me, and she knew I was single. I had been married before.
Mm-hmm.
And she knew I was single, and she said, I know this couple, and they're in the process of getting divorced, and the husband is just the most amazing guy. And once I get the green light from him, then I want to set you guys up. And I was like, okay, I just kind of shook it off a little bit. And so that was in mid-May, I would say. I had been on Match.com for a while at that point. And so come mid-June, I was connected with a guy on Match whose name was Jack. And I, looked at his profile. He seemed nice. He sent me a message, but I didn't respond to him. And I don't know why. I just didn't. It was really random that I didn't. And so he wrote me back again. and told me a little bit more about his life and his background and his kids. And I was sharing an office. I was working in a PR agency at the time, and I was sharing an office with somebody. And she's like, Jen, he's from your town. He seems like such a nice guy. Like, you should definitely go out with him.
Yeah.
And so we talked for a little while before our first date, which was to a Red Sox game.
Cute.
It was July 3rd. It was about 105 degrees.
Oh
it
my
was
goodness.
so hot. And I was like, oh my God, it's a date, but it's a baseball game. Like, what am I going to wear? Like,
yeah, that's true.
And so he came, and my parents were living with me at the time. And so he comes to my door, and my parents are like peeking out the window, and I'm so embarrassed. I feel like I'm a teenager. And he had a single onion flower in his hand, which I still have today. I dried it and, of course, framed it. And he came to my door, and he got me, and we very quickly realized that he was the man that the friend was referencing a month before.
That's so awesome.
I think, actually, you know what? I don't know that we realized it right away. I think it was maybe like once we started dating that the woman, her name was Marcy, she came up to me and was like, that's the guy I was talking about.
Oh my goodness.
So we always did credit her. With officially setting us up, and then Match is secondary. And so we went on our first date to the Red Sox game. So the other kind of funny part of the story is that my dad was also going to the Red Sox game that night.
Oh.
But, you know, I mean, there's a million people at a Red Sox game. And we were going to like kind of a nicer restaurant beforehand, and he's more of like a hot dog on the street kind of guy, my dad. So we're sitting at the bar eating our dinner, and I hear this laugh that is like clearly my dad. He has a very loud, distinct laugh. And I turn around and I look at Jack and I go, oh, my dad's here.
That is funny.
And he's like, okay, what do we do? And I was like, I don't know. And so long story short, my dad came over, met him, shook his hand. And so it was always a joke of ours that he met my dad on our first date.
On your first date.
And
that's so cute.
That was the beginning. And it was a pretty quick courtship. So that's how we met.
Tell me more about how long until you got married and what your life was like then.
So he was going through a divorce at the time. And so, you know, I mean, he had been separated from his wife for a while at that point, but they were still kind of figuring out all the logistics. And so, you know, we started spending a lot of time together. I helped him furnish his apartment, you know, all these weird things. I'm not really sure why I did this, but on our first date, apparently I had said to him, I really want to go someplace out of the country. Oh. Now, I have no idea what would possess me to say this on a first date with somebody. I didn't even remember really saying it, to be honest. And so, like 2 months into a relationship, he was like, I just booked us a trip to Bermuda.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, wait, what? And he's like, well, you told me that you wanted to go someplace out of the country. And I was like, I did? That's so embarrassing.
Yeah.
And so for us here in Boston, Bermuda is actually fairly close. It's like an hour and a half flight because it's just, right.
Nice.
And so we went there for the weekend, the end of August, and now we had been dating 2 months. I told him I loved him, and he told me that he couldn't say that he loved me back until I had met and loved his kids. And I thought that was a very fair and sweet and admirable response.
Yeah.
So we came back, maybe like 4 months later, I met his kids. He met my daughter. They met each other. You know, it was really fun for like that first year or so. And we were in New Hampshire at Lake Winnipesaukee one weekend about a year later, and we're sitting at dinner, and at this point he was living in his own apartment. I had my house, and it was, you know, and I just looked at him and I was like, I think we should just get married. And he looked at me and he's like, okay.
Nice.
So, it was like it wasn't any grandiose proposal or it was literally like, let's get married. Okay. And it was August. And I was like, when do you want to do it? And he's like, I don't know, like December. I was like, sure, that sounds good.
Wow.
And so all of a sudden, with the night went on and we were like, holy smokes, like we're going to get married in 4 months. Like, let's start planning a wedding.
Yeah. Lots to do.
So we came home and he ended up telling the kids without me. And so one day I did come home, and I have a really great photo of this, but I came home and he and the kids were in the backyard, the dogs, and they had like those confetti cannons.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And so with the kids, he made kind of a bigger deal of the proposal.
I love
we were getting
that.
married. And that was it. And we planned a wedding in 4 months. Wasn't anything grandiose. It was just, gathering of friends. And that was how it all started.
Yeah. And how was the transition, right? How was the transition like with his kids and your daughter and blending? Because we're blending a family. So it's an interesting, hard dynamic.
It is. In fact, I'll talk about this later, but it's part of, what I'm doing right now is, in the business that I'm trying to start is really about helping people through life transitions. And that was definitely one of them for me.
Yes, that's a hard one.
Becoming a stepmom, blending the family. My daughter was very young. She was about 3, and his daughter was 5, and his son was 7. So they were all young.
Okay.
Our daughters thought it was the greatest thing ever that they had sisters. And I swear they must have matched, like word matching clothes for like the first 3 years of their relationship with each other. So that part was fairly easy. He obviously had a pretty contentious divorce. And so that was really challenging.
Yeah.
It actually took a really long time for that divorce to be finalized. So that was really hard. We were going through that. I was trying to support him, and his ex-wife did not make that easy at all, and did not make it easy with the kids either. Said really mean things about me, and and so that made it difficult. And his kids, by year 5 or 6 of our marriage, had also been through a significant amount of trauma in their young lives. And so that, made it difficult too, because we were, it wasn't just like having an average, family. Yeah. We were dealing with some pretty big feelings and some pretty big trauma and pretty big anxiety. And so, and quite frankly, we had very different parenting styles. And so trying to navigate that was really difficult. And, as much as amazing as he was, and as much as I loved him, like it wasn't easy. Right. And so, we made it work to the best of our ability, but it definitely, there were some crazy moments along the way. That people were like, really? You're still doing this? And I was like, yes, I'm still doing this. I love him with my heart and soul. And it's sometimes a little bit bananas here, but we figure it out. And so, now the kids are 15, 17, and 19. And so, they've spent most of their life together. Yeah. His daughter actually came to live with us full time. So I pretty much, I raised her pretty much. And so, we used to joke that we never knew who was going to be home. We never knew what kid was going to be in the room or where, it was just kind of like this like flow of like, schedules were made but broken. And, I just made dinner for 5 every night and had leftovers if we had leftovers. Right.
And
just
so
kind of did. Yeah.
During this time period, you're blending the families. Were you home with the kids, or did you work outside the home? What was your life like at that point?
I worked outside the home. I worked at a PR and marketing agency. I had been doing that for about, actually, when I left that agency, which was right at the beginning of COVID, it had been about 23 years and I had been in the agency world. And so I worked a 9 to 5 plus job. Yeah. So I had my full-time job. I had the 3 kids, and, another big part of my story, I don't know if this is where it goes, but, is that I also, became addicted during that time. It's probably something that obviously it started as in much younger, but I finally made peace with the fact that, I was an alcoholic. And that was about 5 years ago. And so during all of this, it was working and, blending and dealing with these emotions. And I and my husband would, come 7:00 at night, we would sit on the couch and just drink our feelings away. And that became a pretty typical part of our relationship. And so, like I said, about 4.5 years ago, I decided that I was going to get sober and go into recovery. Nice. And it's an extremely, extremely important part of my life today.
Yes.
And, I actually give recovery and Alcoholics Anonymous, credit for keeping me alive throughout this transition of Jack passing.
Yeah. So what was the first, just kind of staying with this part of the story, what was the first thing you did so you realized you want to get help? What did you do? Like, I'm just, I'm sure there's other people in this situation.
So I had a therapist for a really long time, and she was the only one that knew that I potentially had a problem.
Right.
And she retired. And so I was like, oh God, now who am I going to talk to?
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure why I did this, but I had my annual physical, my primary care, who I have a great relationship with. And I just said to her during my physical, I said, I think I drink too much. And she asked me how much, and I told her, and she said, yep, that's a lot. And she asked me a really important question, which was really momentous to me, was, how much do you think about it?
Oh,
and it wasn't, not so much how do you drink, but how much do you think about it? And I was like, it controls my life, because I drink at night, I wake up hungover, I feel good for a couple hours, and then I'm like waiting until I can drink again. And I realized that was the cycle of my life. And so she sent me to a really amazing, there's a clinic here at the hospital, the local hospital near us. There's a substance use services clinic. I started going there. I wasn't really ready to stop drinking yet. Took me another couple of months. A big concert, was my last hurrah. And then after I was going to the clinic, and then I started going to Alcoholics Anonymous. And that became a huge part of my life. And it also became a challenging part of my relationship with my husband. Because
was he still drinking and you weren't?
He was still drinking and I wasn't. And there was a lot of resentment there. And, he had lost his drinking buddy. And, I was going to these meetings with strangers, and, it definitely caused some tension in our relationship. But, I can say again today, it is what I rely on every day to get me through life. I go to meetings 4 or 5 times a week. I have, amazing friends. I have a sponsor. I believe in higher power. I believe that he has, kind of taken me through all of these life transitions for a reason. And that when I am incredibly overwhelmed, then I can just like pause and turn it over to him. And,
exactly.
So, it's given me a lot to believe in, and a lot to guide my life.
And amazing that you did that before your husband died, that you were able to already take care of that, like really work through that before, because it seems like it'd be worse if you hadn't,
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reality is that, I speak a lot, and I get back to the, the recovery community a lot. And, when I tell my story and I get to the part, and I'll tell you a little bit more of the details of when Jack dies, the room usually goes, because it was fairly traumatic. And the next response is always, and you didn't drink? And I feel a lot of pride in the fact that no, I didn't. I relied on my community and my faith.
Yep.
And, I actually have a friend whose wife is in the process of leaving this earth right now. And I just keep reminding him every day that drinking is only going to make it work. It's not going to make her live. It's not going to make her, in my case, it wasn't going to make Jack come back.
Right.
And so it would only make me feel like crap. And so, so that was I talk about that a lot as a kind of example of, we can go through hard things and not rely on our bad habits.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you for not, a lot of people, it seems like, would totally turn back to drinking. I want to numb the pain. I don't want to think about this, but you didn't. And that's amazing. And I'm so thankful that you got to that place before he died.
Yes, I am too.
Really great.
I am insanely grateful for that every day.
Yes. So
thank my higher power for that.
Yes, definitely. So let's talk about the day that life changed for you. Tell us about that.
So Jack and I were gifted a trip to Greece.
Oh, wow.
Amazing. Very gracious, very generous, huge gift from a family member. And we had been planning it for a year. When I say we, really I have been planning it for a year. In fact, it was like, very much part of my daily life was I had a whole Excel spreadsheet going. I had like a whole packet going of where we were going, when we were going, what we were going to do. And I worked a little with a travel agent, but that was fun to me. The whole planning process was, a really fun, stressful, but fun part of it. And so, we were gifted this in June of 2023, and we weren't going until end of May 2024. So that gave me a whole year to research and plan, and that I did. I don't know, probably spent hundreds of hours planning this trip. And so the time finally came for us to go, and we got on our plane, and I had my little booklet that I had made in hand of, everything that we could need and more. And we arrived in Athens, where we spent our first 2 days. And then we got on a boat and went to the island of Mykonos. And we arrived in Mykonos. We had 2 days in Mykonos and went out for dinner to this really incredible, I think they call them beach clubs, but it's basically restaurants on the beach.
Wow.
And they're massive. And this one was called Scorpios, and it was an experience that I've never had an experience like this. It was just huge, and there was music and people and beautiful people, and it was crazy. And so we went to dinner, and we had a great time, and we came home, and we went to bed. And at about 4 a.m, now remember, we're in Greece, so there's a major time change between where we were and where our family was. And about 4 a.m, he woke me up. He had said he had been up for about an hour, and he said, I've been up for about an hour. I'm having really bad chest pains. I think I'm having a heart attack. And I said, okay. And I ran downstairs in the hotel. We were staying in a pretty small boutique hotel, and the manager happened to be down there. And I said, we need to call 911. My husband's having a heart attack. And he said, well, we don't really have 911 you do in the US. And I said, okay, we'll call for medical assistance, whatever it is. And so he came with me back up to our room, and he was making calls, but we were on an island. It was still off season. Season doesn't begin from them until about mid-June, and this was the end of May. And, the response wasn't great. And so while we were waiting for some form of paramedics or healthcare workers to come, this really kind and generous hotel owner was with me, and I'm on the phone with my dad back in the US. I'm giving him CPR, and within about 10 minutes of me coming back to the room, he died.
Oh my goodness.
And so, it was insanity. I mean,
Yes.
the paramedics eventually came. They did what they could. I knew that he was gone at that time already. They wouldn't let me in the room because they were trying
my
to
goodness.
resuscitate him and, do whatever they could. And so, I think at this point I had called my parents for sure. I'd been on the phone with my dad and maybe he has 3 sisters, and his mom, and I definitely at least called one of them. And so, I watched about an hour later, they put him in a bag and took him out of the hotel room.
My goodness.
And the first place I had to go was to the police station because I'm in a foreign country.
Yeah.
And my husband just dies in a hotel room and I'm the only one that's there. And so, the first place that law enforcement's head go is, well, was she involved in this?
Oh my goodness.
And so here my husband had died, an hour before, and I'm sitting in a police station in Greece where they only speak Greek. I have the manager of the hotel who speaks English with me, who's doing all of my translations. And it was horrible.
Yes.
And so now at this point, it's around 5 or 6 in the morning there, which meant I think it was probably about 10 p.m. here, where my family was. And I was, slowly calling people and asking for help. I mean, that's one of the things that I've really learned in my recovery is how to ask for help. And Jack went to Georgetown for college and had there's a lot of international students there. And so he had, several friends around the world that I were able to quickly connect me into the U.S. Embassy and kind of hold my hand and walk me through the process. And the U.S. Embassy was incredible. Like they were really helpful, but, they had to take his body and bring him back to Athens and get him into a funeral home there. And I had to come home.
Oh my goodness.
And so, my dad and one of his sisters were about to get on a plane and come and, just be with me and help me travel home. But the reality was I was going to be able to leave like pretty much within hours of them coming. And I was like, I'm not going to make them fly out here just to turn around and go home. I think looking back, I might have made a different decision, but I'm a very, I can do this on my own, very independent person. And so I was like, why would you come all the way here for me just to go home? That flight was the most horrible 10 hours of my life because I was alone. Yeah. And I'm sitting in a plane and I just was bawling. And I will say there was a woman who came over to me and she said, I know you talk a lot about faith, and this woman came over to me and she asked me what happened. Or she asked me if I was okay. And I said, yes. And she said, do you want to talk about anything? And I said, no. I said, my husband just passed away. It's really new. And she said, can I pray for you? Aww. And I said, of course. That's and so awesome. We both sat there in prayer for 20 minutes on this packed flight. And, I truly, I believe that she's just one of the many people that was put on this earth to help me through that process. Yeah. And so, it was pretty horrible. And, I know everybody's story is different. I'm a very big, another piece of recovery that I've learned is about identifying, not comparing. And so, well, that's good. A lot of people listening and your story and my story and other guests, like our stories might all be different, but we can still identify with the feeling and the life that comes after losing somebody that you love so much.
Yeah, so I have so many questions before we move forward. Like you were in a foreign country, so I'm sure everything's different. So was it like complicated trying to figure out how to transport his body and like all the things you would have to do and like what was that? And where were you like emotionally during this? Like I know people say I can't imagine, but like I honestly have never thought of like this whole scenario, what it would be like. Like how did you survive? Like until you could leave.
I think when I got home, I was in survival mode. And yes, I had to deal with all the transportation and I had to deal with the autopsy had to be done in Greece. That was a really difficult thing. because I didn't get the autopsy report for about 8 months.
Oh my goodness.
And it was because it had to be done, and it had to go through all of these
Right.
government platforms in order to be translated and then released to me.
Wow.
And so that was kind of a whole complicated situation.
Yeah.
And I think, I had pretty much assumed at that time he had a heart attack, but I really wasn't 100% sure. And so, yes, like I said, I had a lot of communications with the U.S. Embassy in Greece. They were very helpful. He had gone to a funeral home there where the autopsy was performed. The people who it was a place recommended by the U.S. Embassy that they unfortunately have used for these kinds of situations, and so they were pretty familiar with dealing with people overseas. And they were incredibly kind and helpful and dealt with my million questions every morning and every night.
Yeah.
I was I'm pretty good at asking for help. I had learned that skill.
Good.
And I'm a fairly good delegator. And so it was like, and one of the reasons I married him, I used to joke with him that I married him for his friends. He has the most incredible, his college crew, his Georgetown crew is this incredibly tight group of men. And it was kind of like, Dave, can you help with this? And, Chris, can you help with this? And can somebody else help with this? And so I was really lucky, that I had people around me to kind of deal with those, because there was no way I was going to be able to deal with all of it myself.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So it was a lot. And I came home, and it's funny, my office that I'm sitting in right now faces my front yard. And every time I look, I stay here most of the days, and I look outside and there's a tree in my front yard. And I remember my parents had picked me up at the airport, and I came home, and my 3 kids, this will make me cry, but the 3 kids were home, and Jack's very best friend and also his business partner was here, and the 4 of them came out, and we just sat in a circle on the grass. And there was a lot of people at the house. It was, chaos, as it often is. And we sat there for just a couple of hours, just crying and processing and, doing the whole, like, how is this real?
Yeah.
And so, people gave us our space. I was grateful for that. And we had our time outside, and it was May, so it was beautiful here in Boston. And then it was like entering the insanity, walking back into my house. It was his whole family was there. My family was here. Friends were over, and I was like, oh my God.
It's a lot.
And, people mean well, they want to be there, they want the help, but it's really overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people, I've had that beautiful opportunity to connect with a lot of widows. And I know that process after your loved one passes it's chaotic. It's overwhelming. It's a lot.
Yes.
And so, and my situation was no different. And so yeah, that was kind of the next phase.
So I want to
navigating that.
Yeah, back just a minute. I'm wondering what it was like when you had to call your kids. Like, how did you get through that?
Jack's mom, her name is Kathy, and he has 3 sisters, Carolyn, Christine, and Colleen. They are 4 incredibly strong women. And I don't know whose idea this was, but we basically jumped into action. And so his son was in Connecticut. He was going to school in Connecticut. Actually, both his kids were in Connecticut, and we live in Boston. His son was going to school where his mom lived. His daughter was at a boarding school. And so there were his mom and his 3 sisters, the 4 of them split up. And so 2 went to Drew's school, 2 went to Landy's school.
So in person.
When they got there, they had, met with the guidance counselor or social worker who was available. They called each kid down to the office. Both kids were like, why are we being
What's
called
happening?
to the
Yeah.
office? And when they got in there, I was actually at the airport at that time, and I was on speakerphone. And so it was really important for me to tell them myself, but it was also really important that they had people there.
Yes, that's
that
so good.
were family and people there that were supportive, and both their schools were incredibly, supportive, as you can imagine. And so I told them both over the phone, and, and then we had this plan where they would meet up, they would leave their existing locations and meet up and all travel home together.
Okay.
My daughter was with her dad at the time.
Okay.
And similarly, I had my parents go over there. He lives just 5 minutes from me, and we have a very good relationship. And so it was very early in the morning. Similar, I called in and I told her what had happened. And, it was, about a 3 to 5 minute conversation with each kid. They had a lot of questions that I didn't have a lot of answers for.
Yeah.
They all arrived home before I did, the day before, 24 hours before I did. So 3 kids were home together with family, staying here before I even came. It was another 24 hours before I'd come home.
Wow.
So, again, I believe that God laid out this plan for us.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that He gave us like a pathway to do this. I look back and I actually laugh sometimes or not laugh, but kind of look back in wonderment. Like, how did we pull that off?
Right.
There was so much going on. I'm in a foreign country. I'm staying with a friend's cousin at this point. There's so much going on. I'm being interrogated by the police, and somehow we came up with a really good plan.
Yeah, it is a good plan
to support the kids while we told him that the worst news they have ever heard.
Right.
And so that was how we let the kids know. And like I said, they were home together with much quicker than I was home.
Yeah, that's great.
And I think that was obviously somewhat helpful for them. And then they all, as every kid does, they all have handled it very differently.
Yes.
And even in those initial days, in the initial weeks, it was very, they all handled it very differently.
So let's talk about what those first weeks and months were like. And also, I'd like the audience to know that this was just this past May, right? May of 24. So you're still a baby widow, but you are here being courageous and sharing your story. And I'm so proud of you.
I am. Thank you. I mean, I feel honored to be able. Thank you for allowing me to do this. I feel honored.
You're welcome.
It's part of my healing process.
Yes, it's so healing.
And so those first, we had to plan a funeral and all that stuff. We did a celebration of life, which was a giant party. We rented out a local restaurant, to kind of tell you how incredible of a person my husband was. We had almost 900 people at the wake.
I've never even heard of that many ever. That's amazing.
I know. It was crazy. It was Sunday afternoon, and I've never stood so long in my whole life.
Yeah.
And we had people flying in from all over the world, literally.
That's amazing.
And it was a combination of just childhood friends through college, through adulthood. He was very beloved in his industry. He worked in the lumber industry and then in the construction industry. I was very supported by my AA community. I mean, there must have been at least 100 people from AA that came out. His family is a huge Catholic family. His mom's one of 11. And so there's lots of aunts and uncles and cousins and stuff. And so it was just, my parents had a lot of people fly in to support them, which was really great. It was crazy, but beautiful. Yeah. And so that was on a Sunday. And then we had a a funeral mass on Monday morning that we did not put in any publications because I did not want it to be like the wake was, and I knew that there was a chance. And so that was more of kind of a invite only, if you will. And I know we still had close to 150, 200 people there, but and then after that, and this was public, we had rented out this just regular American bar restaurant near us, and people could come, and we called it a celebration of life. And it started, right after the funeral and went on for hours upon hours.
Yeah.
And people gave speeches, and it was, it's interesting. I haven't thought about it like that specific moment in a long time. And, I feel really blessed that I had so many people supporting me and my kids. And, his daughter very early on was like, I'm out of here. Okay, go. Just as long as you're safe. Like, that was not someplace that she wanted to be. My daughter was glued to my hip, and, his son was kind of more mature, socializing, talking to people and stuff. And, so that was the kind of immediate, week. And mind you, you had asked about the transportation of his body, and we had to figure that out before we could even
plan,
have a funeral. So that was the first week. And so, after that, I had a really, again, God's plan. I don't know why I would have thought of this myself, but I have two best friends, and one of them lives in Florida and one of them lives in Nashville, and one of them was there the moment I came home from Greece and was with me through the funeral. The other one came just before the funeral and stayed with me for a week after.
Oh, that's so great.
And I will say, having her for that week after, I mean, they were both equally as important, but having somebody there, because I don't know about others' experiences, but it was like the funeral happened and then it was silent.
Yep. That's when it gets hard, real hard. I mean, it's already been hard.
And I was like, where'd everyone go?
Where's all the people go? Yes.
And I mean, I was relieved to some degree, but I was also like, and so I was really very lucky. My friend Emily was with me, and she made me take care of myself, and made me laugh, even though it was the most horrible of times. And we kind of figured out the kids' schools were all very, it was the end of the school year. Yeah. So they were all really great about giving them grace on their assignments and finals and all of that kind of thing. And so figuring that all out. And then, I've been through other life transitions in my life, and my go-to is to work. And so 2 weeks after he had passed, I called my boss. I was working for Boys and Girls Club of America at the time. I'd been there about 4 years. I did corporate partnerships for them. Wow. Incredible organization. Yeah. 5,200 clubhouses across the country. And I loved it. And my boss said, "Are you sure?" And, again, I don't know everyone's policy, but the bereavement time is not very long. And, again, they were very kind and generous, but they also had to have some boundaries and rules. And so I said, yes, I need a distraction. I need to come back to work. And I went back to work for about 10 days, maybe a little longer, maybe a little less. And I ended up checking myself into a mental hospital. It was, again, in hindsight's 2020, it was the worst idea. Because even though I had been through other difficult transitions, this was completely, just the worst one yet. Yeah. And I also worked in the nonprofit world, and there is a significant amount of emotion that comes with working for nonprofits. And when you're at your emotional capacity and you add like the emotional part of work to it, was just, it put me over the edge. Yeah. And I was still trying to navigate the kids, and it was just, it was crazy. And I had mentioned earlier, there was the clinic that I had gone to when I first got sober, and I didn't know where else to go. And I walked into the Newton Wellesley Hospital and I went right up there and I just sat in their lobby and they knew what to do with me. And so from that point on, I did not go back to work. I did take short-term disability and then I was able to extend that. And so I had short-term disability between July and December of last year.
Oh, good.
And so, and, you know, it was, I mean, it's crazy. It's an emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
To, again, navigating kids, navigating my life, wondering what was next.
Yeah.
You know, I kept saying to I found a really wonderful therapist. I jumped into the support because I had known what had helped me in my recovery. And so I did a program called Grief Share, which I believe is a national program.
Yes, lots of people do it.
Yeah. And I found a therapist right away. You know, I would say to her every week, I'd say, well, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to me? What am I going to do?
Right.
She would say, don't worry about that right now.
Right.
Like, just get through the day and tomorrow. Like, stop worrying about what the future is going to be. That was really hard for me. Really, really hard for me. Because I'm a planner.
Right. I can tell that.
As you can tell by my Greece planning. Like, I'm a planner. I want to know that things are going to,
want to know the next
how
thing.
things are going to fall in place.
Yeah. So after oh, go ahead.
So yeah. So no, that's.
I was just going to say, so after you left the mental hospital, you decided you're on disability. What did you start doing to fill your time and continue healing, you know?
The water is my happy place. The beach is my happy place. I grew up in South Florida. Yeah. I have I had a former colleague friend who had a place in the Cape, and ironically I call them, I don't know if this is okay to say, but I call them God shots. That's what we call them in AA when things just serendipitously happen. And so another God shot moment was that this woman had also lost her husband 2 years before. And so she said, you know, just come whenever you want. And so, you know, I went, it was about an hour and a half away. I went down there a couple of times. It was the only place that I really felt at peace was when I was by myself sitting at the ocean, reading, you know, novels that were brainless.
Distractions.
Yes, you know, transporting me to another place. I read a lot during that time because it was like the only way that I could stop my thoughts. And you know, it's so it's funny because you forget. You know, trauma does that to you. And you know, what did I do during my days? I really have no idea, but I was busy as anything. You know, I feel I did not take time off of work when my daughter was young. I went right back to work after she was born, and you know, again, you know, gratitude is a big piece of my life, and I feel grateful that I actually get to be here now for her as a teenager. It's very different, but I get to drive her to school every day. I get to pick her up. We have adult relationship kind of sort of you know you know, the same thing. My stepdaughter Landy she went back to boarding school in the fall and had a very difficult transition. And so I would say almost every day was on the phone with her navigating some sort of situation. Again, she couldn't have been at a better, more supportive school. You know, they were really incredible and helpful through all of it, but it's still. And then my stepson had just started his freshman year of college. And so, you know, he went up to college and we did family visiting day, and it all was real life. It all, you know, we kind of went back to our life, but with a huge missing piece.
Right. I love that.
So,
you guys, so I have heard some stories when there's blended families that sometimes the stepkids then are out of the picture, and it seems so incredibly sad. So I love that yours didn't change. Like you still are a family. Yeah,
we still are a family. And, you know, like I said, my stepdaughter had moved in with me or with Jack and I very young. And so, you know, yes, that was very much, you know, they do have a relationship with their mom, but you know, I think they relied on Jack and I a lot. And that didn't stop, except that it was just me. And so, and I had to learn a lot in the process. I had to learn how to set boundaries, which is something I had to learn about consequent. You know, I had to learn a completely different parenting style than I was used to.
Right.
Because it was just me.
Right.
And you can only handle so much. And so, you know, the no's came more frequent than the yeses, which was the opposite of what our life had been for so long. And it was really hard for me. But you know, I'm happy to say we're in a good place right now.
I love that.
But it was hard. It was those I would say August to December of last year was really difficult.
It's
you know,
brutal.
it's like we had the summer of like, is this real? Is this not real? You know, and then all of a sudden reality, we're all back at school, you know, we're all back to our lives, and it's, you know,
and like, this is our new reality.
Overwhelming and chaotic. And so, you know, one of the things that I did though, that, you know, like I said, I jumped into Grief Share. I found a therapist right away. I also, found a retreat to go to in November. And so it's kind of funny. I surprise myself sometimes. I don't know how or why or what possessed me to do this, but I went to Costa Rica on a wellness retreat. I'm not a yoga meditation, I'm a spiritual person, but that's just not really my thing. But I signed up for some yoga, and I show up, you know, by myself at the airport in Costa Rica, and I think there were about 8 of us on the trip, and they were all significantly younger than I am. And they're like, "Oh, hey, you know, how much do you practice?" And I was like, "Practice what?"
Oh my gosh.
And they're like, "Yoga," and I was like, "I don't really. I mean, I've taken some classes. I really like it." But again, something that was an incredibly good decision, because I had told my family, my kids, my parents, everybody that they were literally not allowed unless there was like a major crisis. They could not call me or text me. And that's exactly
so good.
Like I needed to shut things off. And you know, whether it was in Costa Rica or down the street, it probably didn't matter. I just needed peace.
And
whether
what was
it was
that like?
Doing yoga or, you know, which again, I'm not, or what, it didn't matter what I was doing. You know, of course it didn't hurt that I was in this beautiful place. And, you know, I could walk down to the beach whenever I wanted. And so that was really nice. But, you know, it was really important. And I, you know, encourage others in this situation and others too. Like you've got to step away from from the things that you got to recharge.
Self-care. That's what I see.
That was really self-care.
That's throughout your story, as you learned how to take care of yourself, you know, starting with your recovery things, and you're able to like, okay, I need to take care of me, because we know if we don't take care of ourselves, we're not going to be good to anybody else. Exactly. And you run out of energy. Like I picture myself as, you know, what you see on your phone, like the battery, and it just goes down and down and down. And when I went to Costa Rica, like I was like negative battery. And I literally I needed to recharge. And what did that do for you? Like,
well, it gave me the idea to start my new business.
All right, let's talk about that.
That's a big thing that, you know, what did it do for me? It, I don't know. It recharged, like I said, it recharged me. It was like, I felt as though when I got there, you know, I picture myself like sunken, you know, cheeks sunken in and like shriveled up. And by the time I left, I was like moisturized and filled with, you know, you know, on the plane ride home, I was thinking that I had this incredible experience and this break from life, but I knew not everybody could just get on a plane, had the guts or the finances to get on a plane and go to Costa Rica. I also really had wished that I had a deeper connection with the people I was with. They were lovely. We had
Right.
a great time. I learned all kinds of tips on skincare and, you know, vitamins, because they're all millennials and they're all into all their homeopathic naturalistic stuff. And so I learned a lot.
You
They
learned
were
a lot,
lovely.
yeah.
But
they probably weren't widowed.
You know, they definitely weren't widowed.
Right. So
and
it was totally
their stressful life that they were running away from was very different than my stressful life that I was running away from. And so on the way home, you know, again, I had worked in PR and marketing my whole life. I've planned a million events. And I was like, well, what if I plan my own retreat? But the audience was widows.
I love it.
And so I took out, I don't even think I had my computer with me. I think I just pulled up my phone in the notes section of my phone, and I just started like voice noting.
Yeah.
I don't know if voice dictating, that's the word. All of these ideas. And so, you know, I came back not only refreshed, but also a teeny bit, not fully, but a teeny bit inspired.
Yeah.
And with like a little sense of direction of what I was going to do next.
That's
and I had no idea, like, you know, it was the tiniest seed was planted.
Right.
And I have, you know, been growing that seed since then.
Yeah. It's so amazing when you get this like new direction. That's how I felt when I started my nonprofit. Like you just get this excitement that you haven't had before. And it's like, it's often born out of our pain and how we want to help people, like, you know, we've been helped. And so I love that that's what came out. So let's talk more about like this business and what you're doing. And because it's super exciting.
It's crazy. It's bananas to me. But it's kept me going. And so I, pretty quickly decided that I was going to do this retreat for widows. I took a lot of my experience planning events before, combined with my AA experience, combined with the experience I had just had in Costa Rica, and I kind of pulled the best of everything that I could, that I knew together. And so I very quickly decided that I wanted the retreat to be at a house, not at a hotel or a retreat center. That was really important to me. And so I went on Airbnb and I found a house. I knew that I wanted it to be in the state that I was in, because I didn't want to leave my daughter and do some crazy international trip. And so I found some place that's in the Berkshire Mountains. It's beautiful. And so that was like the first step. And I was like, the whole time I'm like, I can't believe I'm doing this. But I did it. And you know, I've just spent the last couple of months really focused on planning the retreat. There's a maximum of 12 people that can come, and I already have 3 amazing women who signed up. So, and you know, we haven't even gotten there, and I feel like they're my new best friends, you know? Right. So, and they're, you know, communicating with each, it's just really wonderful. I love it. So it was I put some pretty, not loose guardrails around it. You know, I wanted it to be not very scheduled. So that people had. I took that from the Costa Rica retreat, is that we had a lot of free time, and I needed that free time.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I also wanted it to be fun. You know, we're going to do some stuff that's really fun. And, so I just, you know, again, took some of the things that I've learned. You know, if you're not familiar, which you probably are, with Alcoholics Anonymous, it's you know, we do meetings every week or every day. Sorry. There's hundreds of them all over the world every day. And so the structure of it, it's an hour meeting, and there's different structures, but the primary one that I go to is, you know, somebody shares their experience, strength, and hope for about 10 or 15 minutes. They come up with a topic, and people talk about that topic as it relates to their life. And so I thought that was a pretty good format. And so I'm using that. I'm stealing that format. Thanks, Bill Wilson, who founded AA. You know, I'm going to do sessions and stuff. But I also quickly decided that I don't want to be an event planner for the rest of my life. Yeah. And I also quickly realized, so I had this like grand idea of like, you know, helping people, obviously, but as everybody would say to me, well, how are you going to make money? And I was like, oh, that's not important, but It actually is.
It is, yeah.
And so, in addition to planning the retreat, I filed an LLC for my company. It's called Life Gets Lifey LLC.
So cute. I love
the
that.
actual publicly facing company, or what people will see, is called It's Lifey.
It's Lifey. I love it.
And, it's that, nobody's life is linear. Everybody goes through transitions, whether they're joyous or painful, they happen. And I really believe that when you go through them, and I've been through enough myself to know that you feel really alone. Yeah. And being around people who get it is, critical to success, you successfully navigating those transitions. And so I have, in fact, I'm looking at it off to my right, I have this presentation that is, I don't know, a version of a business plan, I guess. I have 3 different directions that I'm potentially taking the company in. And I've been talking to what my goal is this month and next month. I've had the opportunity to work with some really amazing people over the last 30 years. And I've just been calling on them and talking to them. And I'm building like a mini advisory board.
That's awesome.
And saying, hey, which idea do you like best? And what would you add to it? What would you take away? And I'm hoping by the end of April to have, a solid 5 people that I can build this business with.
That's amazing. And what are you going to be doing? I mean, I know you have lots of ideas, but what are like some of the ideas?
So there's 3 main things. The first is that I continue doing retreats. But I will likely do them for existing organizations. I've had a lot of nonprofits, widow nonprofits, trauma nonprofits say, we have meetings and we have Zooms and stuff like that, but that would be fun for us to go away together. And so, I would continue to plan the retreats, but for, kind of customized for existing nonprofits and for-profits. And they all, the mission of the company is to connect people going through difficult life transitions so that they can share their experience, strength, and hope.
So good.
So, I don't really want to, being a widow is a huge part of my story. And it's obviously something that want to be able to share with others and connect others. I don't know that I'll stay in the completely just widow lane, divorce is also a part of my story, and step parenting is a part of my story. And, there's, people who need each other in those areas. So it's really connecting. It's all about connecting people. Yeah. And so the retreats is one kind of avenue. One second, sorry.
No, you're good.
The second avenue is to work with Fortune 500 companies and their HR departments to build employee resource groups for people going through life transitions. Okay. And so I'm not sure, I'm sure some of the listeners will be familiar with this, but, when the DEI movement kind of started 7-8 years ago, most companies created employee resource groups for minorities. And it was just kind of a thing to do. Everybody was doing it. And if you weren't doing it, you were canceled. And so I'm kind of taking a cue from that. But again, building these groups and these resources for people who are going through difficult life transitions. I experienced it myself, and I hear so many stories of people going back to work and feeling alone and not having the capacity, and as kind as the organization can be and as wonderful as HR and your boss and all that can be, having people who've been through the same thing.
Yes, that's huge.
Invaluable. And so that's the second avenue. And then the last one is my crazy,
let's hear it.
Crazy big idea. And that's to actually develop an app.
Ooh, I like
that
it.
Has the same functionality as a dating app, but it would be, the people, your profile would be what you are going through in life in that time. And it would, use some fancy algorithm that I don't understand because I'm not a tech person, but it would connect people.
It's a great idea.
To each other. And, with the ultimate goal of going and having a coffee or going on a date, if you will. But it's, it's more, and I think that there's 2 avenues even with that, where it's, connecting with people who are going through the same thing at the same time, but also
Yeah.
connecting with people who've been through it, who can be a
Yeah.
mentor to you.
I love it. You know,
So,
another big,
that's going to take a couple of years and some money to raise and all that, but we'll see.
What I love about that too is I heard this a lot on the retreat. There were a lot of people who were caretakers. And so that would be another avenue to connect caretakers to each other, because it's a long, hard job.
It is.
So that could be another it's Lifey kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Connect.
There's lots of Lifey.
Yes.
Life gets Lifey.
I love it.
My favorite phrases. I did not make it up by any stretch of the imagination. But it's something that I really feel like, everyone's like, no, life's not linear for anyone.
Yeah. I love how you're making purpose from your pain and doing beautiful, beautiful things. Is there a website or a way people can connect with you to kind of like stay up to date with what you're doing or find out more information about the retreat? What would be a good place?
So I'm still building my website and all that stuff, but you can go to itslifey.com, ITSLIFEY.com. Ooh,
cute.
I knew it was only a matter of time before my dog started barking.
It happens in lots of podcasts. It's fine.
Oh my gosh. And now you're going to have to give me 2 seconds because I got to want to know. Hold on.
Okay, no problem.
I'm back. It's quick.
That was really quick.
It's right near. The door's right near me.
Okay, so it's Lifey.com.
So it's Lifey.com, ITSLAFEY.com. And
perfect.
that will take you to the information about the retreat.
Awesome.
Eventually, it will take you to a much broader website about the company. But for right now, it has all the information about the retreat. There's a form on there that you can fill out if you're interested in coming. I will email you within 24 hours. And
I guess we didn't say when it is.
Oh, sorry. It's in July. It's July 11th through the 14th. It's in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, which is about 2 hours from New York City and 2 hours from Boston. So if you're flying in, you can fly into either of those airports.
Oh,
cool. Tons of options. Yeah, so you can fly into Boston, you can fly into New York, and I will actually provide car service as part of the cost of the retreat.
That's amazing.
So I will have a car waiting for you to take you to the home that it will be at. We're going to have, speaker sessions. I have a chef who's going to cook meals for us. There'll be lots of free time to go read and relax and connect with the other people. I'm being very, every person that's coming, I'm building, or trying to build a relationship with, because it's a really sensitive topic. I understand that. And I want to make sure we have the right mix of people.
Yeah. And I feel like this is, so there's all different kinds of retreats. So the one that I went to was more packed with lots of things, but I love, this is more like a vacation where you're connecting with people who've been through the same thing. The car service, like that alone is worth it. Let me tell you about when we went to Guthrie, Colorado. So for our last retreat that I helped plan, we went to Guthrie, Colorado, which is awesome, but it was 3 hours away from the airport, and I had to rent the car and drive everyone, and the GPS took us on some crazy windy roads. We're in the middle of nowhere, and I don't like doing that. I was stressed out the whole time. I would have loved a car service. I'm just saying. That is an amazing perk.
And, listen, I understand it's, the price point's a little bit higher. I wish I could do this for free. I wish I could just,
things cost money.
But things cost money. And I do, I am erring on the side of, I don't know what the word is. It's not luxury, because I don't think I would call it luxury.
Right. But
definitely, like
quality?
You said, a vacation. Quality,
vacation
kind of vibe. And so, and I'm really flexible and willing to work with people. And in fact, right now I immediately have it's $150 off if you register before May 1st. And then, as I was saying to you, Michelle, anybody that is, listening, or anybody that's associated with your nonprofit or with you, just mention your name and it'll be an additional $150.
Awesome. Thank you.
So,
that's so great.
I'd
love to see some of my listeners be able to get out there and just enjoy the peace,
It is beautiful.
Did you say it's on a lake or it's in the, I can't remember what you told me about it.
It's in the mountains.
It's
not on a lake, but there's a gorgeous pool and
maybe that's what I was mixing it up with.
The house is like ridiculous. Like, I don't know if I continue planning receipts, I can never have it there again because I
Right.
can't afford it.
Right.
But the house in itself, you know, I figured for my first one, it was go big or go home. And,
Right.
you know, I really wanted it to be special. And so, you know, the house itself is just stunning.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, that's what I mean, it's so weird, like you say, turning pain into passion. Like, I connected with somebody today who was a former boss of mine 4 years ago. I haven't spoken to her in 4 years. And I reached out to her, and I think it was LinkedIn, and said, hey, I'm starting a business. I'd love to run it by you. And of course. And we ended up having this like hour-long conversations, you know, about
Awesome.
our lives and about the business.
Yeah.
And in fact, we didn't really even get to the business part of it.
Yeah. Just
But
catching up.
it's been so great to connect with people who have been important to me or that have inspired me throughout my life.
I remember on the first anniversary of my husband Luke's death that I was already obviously so sad, but then I was very, very surprised that a lot of my friends and family did not reach out to me. They didn't send me a text, a phone call, or anything, and that really was something I wasn't prepared for. Now going into the 5th year, I am prepared for it. Even my best friend forgot the first year, but I asked her to put it into her phone, and she's never forgotten since. So that's something you could do, is you could ask your friends and family, please put this date, reoccurring every year, into your calendar. It would mean a lot to me. The other date that has been extremely hard is my would-be anniversary day with Luke, the day we got married, the day that was just ours to celebrate. That's been really hard every year, and that's another one that most people do not know the date of. They didn't put it in their phone. I do have a good friend that remembers it every year, but most people don't. And so what I want to do for you is I want to send you a special message on that day. I want you to know how loved you are. I want you to know how important you are. I want you to know that your feelings are valid. So if you would like me to send you a message on those very hard and very important days, please just put your information below and I will be happy to reach out to you and to continue to pray for you, because we are widows helping widows not only survive, but thrive.
And so if this is the vessel, you know, I always say it's, you know, it's obviously horrible how I got here, but I'm here and I can't change it.
Exactly.
And so, you know, how can I kind of use this to help other people? I mean, that's really
love
what it's
it.
about.
It is. Well, I just have a couple more questions before
yeah,
we go.
of course.
So what has
Yes.
been the most challenging thing about being widowed?
I think I would say two things. The first is just being lonely.
Yeah.
I don't like to be alone. I'm an only child, but my parents always had people over the house.
Yeah.
I never lived alone in college. I never lived alone after college. I always had roommates. Right. And so, you know, and obviously I have my children. But it's really lonely. Like, I want someone to go to the movies with, and I want someone to go see a concert with, and I want someone, I mean, Jack and I had, you know, our marriage was only 11 years long, but it was packed to the brim. We traveled a ton. We were always doing something. In fact, I have a tattoo on my side that says, between hello and goodbye, there was so much love. And that's really what I believe. Sweet. It was, though, between the time that I met him and the time that he left me, we lived life to the fullest. And not having somebody to do that with is really lonely.
Yeah.
So that would be, I think, probably the hardest thing. And second is just being overwhelmed with the amount of to-dos there are associated, you know, when it comes, there's the legal aspect, there's the financial aspect, there's the emotional aspect, there's just a lot. I don't think people outside of our world realize just how much is flying at you and that you're juggling things. And, they're like, so how are you feeling? And you're like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Where do I begin?
Right, exactly. That's true.
So yeah, I would say those have been the loneliness has been really hard. Just not having my partner in crime. Again, we did a lot. We lived life, and to like have that cut off so drastically. Yeah. And all of a sudden, like, be like, oh, well, I still buy concert tickets all the time. I have no idea who I'm going to go with. Right. And it's not, I have friends. I have really great friends. Yeah. But I want it to be him. Right. Yeah. I bought concert tickets to our favorite, artist this summer. And I'm like, but wait, he's not here to go with me. And so that's been really, really hard for me. So I would say the loneliness and the information overload. Yeah.
One more question. What advice would you give to a brand new widow? I mean, I know you're still pretty young in it, but like, those first couple months.
Again, I have a couple of things that I've thought about. And I've mentioned all of them have been woven into my story. Yeah. And I would say the first, and I'm actually helping a friend right now who's, I think I mentioned his wife is in the final stages of life. And I was just talking to him about this last night. Delegate.
That's good.
People want to help. They don't know how to help. I'll give you the example that's happening in real time right now with my friend Steve. And I said, he said to me last night, everybody's calling me. Everybody wants to know updates. I said, give somebody else that job. Make somebody else the point person. Yes. And so he made his brother-in-law the point person, and he's telling everybody that texts him, call, I don't even know what his name is, at this number.
That's so great.
Take yourself, so that's just, the information, but delegating, everything that's going on,
I think it's really good.
And don't feel bad about it. People they really do want to help, and they don't just want to send flowers. Like they really do. And so everything from I talk about flowers, like everything from my friend Carrie Ann, who wrote down every single person who sent something.
Wow.
Which was not something that I was thinking of doing at the, that was thank you for doing that for me. Yeah. To, helping with my kids, to, I decided, I still live in the home that I lived in with my husband. And I decided that I needed to redecorate my living room because it was just too sad. And so and I'm terrible at decorating. And so I had my two friends, Sheila and Kelly, and we went over to Home Goods, and, it was asking for help and delegating are probably like my biggest piece of advice. And then again, this has also been woven into my story, and you said it, echoed it back, and that's self-care. Yes. You are not a super person, superwoman, superman. We're all human beings, and if we don't take care of ourselves, we're no use to others. It's exactly what you said, Michelle.
Yeah, that's true.
And, whether that's a day trip, whether that's a couple hours, just give yourself space to breathe, because your battery will run out.
True. So good.
And that dragging feeling of like, it just makes it so much worse. And, I know everybody else's, everybody's journey is different. And there are some people, who, have a hard time even getting out of bed.
Yeah, that's true.
But go outside. Yes. Even if it's for 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. So that self-care. And, I remember when I first got sober and people said self-care was really important. I was like, so going to get a manicure, that's what self-care, like I didn't even really know what that meant. Like I thought it was like pampering and self-care were the same thing. Yeah. And I've learned, through my recovery and through this grief process that no, self-care is just taking yourself out of the equation, out of the chaos. Yeah. And breathing. Mm-hmm. That's so really
good.
All it takes.
Taking yourself out of the chaos and breathing. I love that. Yeah. That's good.
I mean,
so
you
gotta
do it. Otherwise you'll crumble.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen widows who are there who have not taken care of themselves.
This is not an easy path.
No, it's not.
But it's doable with help and support. And if you don't, it's why you have your nonprofit. It's why I'm doing what I'm doing. There's a lot of people, if you don't have people in your life to help, go online. Like there's so many resources.
Oh, there's so many. Yeah.
I mean, I actually was thinking the other day, I should have called my company, I know somebody who knows somebody. Because
Yeah.
that's like really my like thing in life is like, somebody will call me and be like, hey, do you know anybody? And I'm like, oh yeah, I'll find that person. So,
That's awesome.
There's people
Yeah.
like we're here to connect.
Yeah, totally.
To help you,
So good. Well, thank you. So I'm
Thank
gonna
you so much. This was this was very again healing to me.
It's so healing.
It is. It's an incredible, and I'm grateful for the experience, and so thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'm so glad for everyone getting to hear your inspirational story. And it is so healing at our, the retreat I was just at, everyone had an opportunity to share their story. And some of them was the first time, sharing it in front of people. And it was so healing. There's something about like saying it to, especially, this is an audience of people who get it, to people who understand what our stories are all different, but we understand being widowed and what that's like. So I'd love to pray for you right now. So I'm going to go ahead and pray. God, I just thank you so much for Jennifer. Thank you for helping her find me online and us connecting. And I just pray for blessings over her new business, God. I pray for exactly the widows who are supposed to be at the retreat to be there, whether that's people from our audience or other places. I just pray that you connect those 12 people. I know that you know exactly who's supposed to be. Bring them to this retreat, help them to be able to financially afford it and to be there if they're supposed to. I thank you for Jennifer's family. I pray blessings over all of her kids and Jack's kids and all the kids together, God, that they will continue to bind together and love each other. And I pray for peace over their house. I also pray for every listener today that you will give them the peace that passes understanding and continue to heal their hearts. And we just thank you for all you've done. Amen. Well, if you like this podcast, give it a little 5-star. Oh, I almost forgot to say, I always say Bing 5 stars. I've said it for 4 years now, almost. Like us on Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. And you can see, if you're not aware of this, the video, there's always a video on Spotify. So if you want to, bring your listening to a new level, you can see us on the Spotify app is where you see the video. Eventually, so we are on YouTube, but there's no video yet. Eventually, I'll get to posting this there. Let's see what else. Join our Widowed Too Soon community on Facebook. We're almost up to 12,000 members. It's growing like crazy. We'd love to. It's nuts. We started as a place for listeners to connect, and it was like under 1,000 about a year ago, and then it just exploded. And so much that the people don't even know we have a podcast. So I have to keep telling them this is a podcast. It's a podcast. But anyways, listeners, join the community. We have a smaller community. All of this is in the show notes. I will also make sure to put Jennifer's information for itslifey.com. So you can just click on that and go check out the retreat. Make sure that you send her an email saying you heard about it through me or the podcast, so she knows to give you that $150 off. And I think that's all I got for you today. If you want to share your story, there's an application. We'd love to hear from you. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jennifer. All right. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Widowed Too Soon with Michelle Bader Ebersole. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, rate and review. And we'd also love for you to join our Widowed Too Soon community on Facebook. See you next time.